Hey heathens, and welcome to the first in a series about the Word of God. Okay? The Holy Bible, a book believed by many people to be the 100% inerrant Word of God, the foundation of the Christian religion, a book that has never changed, that was inspired by the Creator. Not so much. The Bible, you have to understand, did not come to be. It was not just like poofed into existence. It wasn't even formed in the same way that the Bible claims that the Ten Commandments came to be, where Moses went up into the mountain and came down with the Ten Commandments. No one went up into a mountain and came down with a Bible. It formed over a long period of time and was a combination of a lot of different writings. I'm not going to focus on the Old Testament in this series, at least not early on. Instead, I'm going to focus on the New, since, let's face it, that's what most people go by anyway. Which unfortunately means that we are going to be getting rid of about that much of a book that thick. So, being that we're dealing with less than a third, what are the books that are in the Bible? Well, it starts with 4 Gospels. After that, you get several writings that are in there, the majority of which come from the Apostle Paul, a man who admittedly, according to the story, never met Jesus face to face. And then there's writings from some other people that are included in there as well. So let's examine exactly why Paul, since he makes up the majority of it, and his writings are the earliest that occurred, as best we can tell, why he was writing letters that would end up in this book. Well, it's pretty simple. He wasn't writing a Bible. He was writing a letter. The same way I'm sending you this video for you to watch. He wrote letters to the people that he had converted. See, Paul went around in different areas and tried to convert the pagans and the Jews and the different people into this religion of Christianity. Of course, he couldn't be in all places at all times. He's not God himself, of course. And there was no internet or television or even a telephone or even a telegraph. So over time, these pagans would start reverting back to their old ways, and he would have to send a letter to remind them how they're supposed to behave until he got back to straighten them out. He goes on to write a total of 13 letters that end up in the Bible, but not every letter he wrote is in the Bible. In fact, in 1 Corinthians, he makes a comment where he refers to another letter that he wrote to the Corinthians. This is 1 Corinthians 5 verse 9, where he talks about a letter he had sent the Corinthians. This is in 1 Corinthians. So before 1 Corinthians, apparently there was another Corinthians. Maybe it was a prequel? I don't know. There's also a letter that apparently they sent back, which doesn't end up in here either, and he talks about that in Corinthians 7 verse 1. Unfortunately, we just don't have all of these letters, and so we're left with what ended up in here. So what is in here? What is in this book? Why the 27 books that are there? Why do we have Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John? Why not just one of them? Did one not get the job done? Or why those 4? Why not the others? Why not the ones that came first? Did I say first? Yes, I did. And we know that there were Gospels before, at least, if nothing else, Luke. Because Luke talks about them himself. He starts off his Gospel in 1:1 through 4. Luke claims that there were many that tried to write down what happened, and that they started out as eyewitness accounts. It's a whole other claim. That'll be in another edition of the series. And that he was going to do his best to compile it together. Now notice what Luke says. He doesn't say that he's going to do his best to tell you the Word of God that is coming into his brain and being dictated to him by the Almighty. He's not saying that he's going to write down what he witnessed himself. No. He's saying that he is going to compile other writings together into his book. Now, each of the Gospels has a slightly different tone in how they approach this whole issue. So it's no surprise that some people accepted one book more than the others. For example, the Gnostics preferred to only use John. Many of the other Gnostic writings also came much later. John was the last. Mark comes first, followed by Matthew and Luke. John was last, and a lot of the other Gnostic Gospels came along with that in that same time frame. While the Gnostics were only using John, there was another group who didn't see Christ as really being Christ. They were Christians. They believed what Jesus was saying. I was not so convinced that he was the Christ. And those people tend to follow Mark. The people following Matthew tended to be Jewish Christians, people who used to be Jewish and got converted. They liked Matthew. Matthew leans heavily on the idea of following the Jewish laws. And that leaves one last group, the ones who were following Luke. Sorta. A man by the name of Marcion, who was a philosopher, teacher, wealthy shipmaker, who made a sizable donation to the Roman churches, decided that he would be the first to try and put together a canonized version of the Bible. And he preferred Luke. Marcion was a big key player in the early days of the Christian church. He was also declared a heretic because he believed that there were two gods, the vicious, old, nasty, ugly God of the Old Testament, and then the New Testament God that was the one Jesus was representing. As somewhat of a direct response to Marcion and his attempt to push this agenda, he was declared a heretic by a man who knew a lot about heretics. In fact, he wrote against heresies. This, of course, is the Bishop of Lyons in Gaul, modern-day France, Irenaeus. Irenaeus decided he would also try and put together his own canon. So here we have some Gospels that we have, some Gospels that we don't, some Gospels that we have that we're not going to use. We have letters written by Paul that we'll use. We have letters written by Paul that we're not going to use. We have letters written by Paul that we don't know what they say. We've got letters from a bunch of other people. We even have what's called orders. These church orders were designed to kind of lay out what they're supposed to be doing, kind of the instruction manual. Don't have all of those either, but we do have some. But only pieces of it end up in the actual Bible. You know, the instruction book. Irenaeus decided that there should be not one, but 4 Gospels. He wrote in Against Heresies 3:11-7, "For since there are 4 zones of the world in which we live, and 4 principal winds, it is fitting that she should have 4 pillars," discussing the 4 Gospels that he would choose, which were Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. It's not until 367 CE that we get the first person, that being the Bishop of Alexandria, who puts together 27 books that he thinks should be the official Word of God. And it's these. In the 4th century, well over 300 years after the death of Jesus Christ, finally we have the books of the Bible. Kinda. Actually, the debate continued for quite a long time, several centuries after that, people trying to determine exactly what should and should not be in the Bible. We didn't get an official version of the Bible until officially the printing press came along, but that's a whole other story. That'll have to do with more when we talk about things in later editions in this series where we discuss, is what we have in this book the same as what was in the first one? We'll be discussing those and many other topics. I hope you found this interesting. The good stuff is yet to come, but don't take my word for it. Think for yourself.